There are some very clear signs that if you're noticing in your own life, that you're noticing within yourself, indicate that you're more awake and operating at a higher level of consciousness. Now, determining this or coming to this conclusion or kind of connecting the dots to see this is not to inflate our egos. This is not something so we can go like, ha, I'm walking around with more consciousness, ha ha, you. And in fact, when I tell you some of the signs, you'll see how that absolutely doesn't work. Now, one of the reasons that it is good to look at this is because having that level of awareness allows you to know if you're on the right path of raising your consciousness and living at higher and higher levels, which just at the end of the day is going to be better and higher, not necessarily better, but higher versions of yourself. And with higher versions of yourself, being in your higher self, it gives you different results. It allows you to shine your light more. It allows you to improve your life and the lives of others. And so this is not for our egos to then get involved and then be like, ha, look at me, look at me, look at me. In fact, it would be the opposite of what these signs are. Now in this, I'm going to be giving you 3 clear signs, and these are some of the best signs I can give you. These are signs that we actually go over with people who are in our high-level program called EMF. And these are the 3 things we tell them to work on. We go even deeper into. It's actually later in the program we mention these to them to helping them raise their consciousness the fastest way possible, more efficiently and more effectively. And of course, I can't give you all the nuances and like all the coaching and everything involved in teaching you this, but I can at least go over what it is so you can start at least moving in this direction. Now, as always, if you find you're not displaying these signs, that's also really valuable for you to know, because then you can start to do the work, start to become aware of where your gaps are so that you can start to apply this more into your life. Because everything I go over, even if like you're not displaying it, you can start to do things in your life to display it, right? It's not going to be that complicated. But these are 3 of those clear signs. These are 3 of the things that if you are displaying, you are doing, you are embodying in your life, well then absolutely you are just becoming more and more awake. And when I say that, it means your consciousness level is rising, which opens you up to so much more. Now, before we get started, I know I mentioned that program. If you want to learn more about that program, I have a free Facebook group called the Elite Transformation Experience. This is where I share some stuff about that program. You can learn more. And I also have additional content that can help you on your journey of transformation and raising your consciousness. The tagline of our program is actually raising global consciousness. So you can check that out down below. Just if you are going to join, make sure you answer the questions that are prompted upon joining. It takes about 30 seconds, but I can't let you in unless you answer them. Now let's jump into what these 3 clear signs are. And again, these are going to be very simple and very straightforward, but mastering these or working on these consistently is just going to catapult your consciousness and your ability to be even more awakened and aware and things of this nature. And the first one is you have started or at least begun the process of letting go of judgment. Now, this is a big one, and I know so many people know of this, but very few people are embodying it. And also understand with each and every one of these things, you'll probably never get it perfect because it's a part of the human experience. But these are tools and insights and awarenesses that just help you to continually raise your consciousness, because ultimately, again, it's not better or worse. A 2nd grader is not better or worse than a 5th grader. They're just at different levels in their growth, in this case, educationally, and it's the same with spiritual growth and awareness. Someone who is in fear is no better or worse, like intrinsically, innately, than someone who's in peace or joy. They're just at different levels in the grading system of what we can call consciousness, right? And you can move up and down those levels quickly. Usually you can move them up quickly. You don't usually go from up here all the way to down there. It doesn't usually happen that way because you know too much. You're too aware at that point. But you can go from, say, the 1st grade in the levels of consciousness very quickly to 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever it is, but you have to go through all the grades. But one of the biggest ones is letting go of judgments. This is such an ego game and is very limited when it comes to raising our consciousness. In fact, it's hard to get past the level of 175 if you look at the Hawking scale, which is pride when it comes to judgment. And judgment exists in anger, in grief, in fear, in obviously guilt and shame, usually through self-judgment. It exists in desire. You know, it exists in all these levels that are below what could be considered a catabolic or anabolic, I should say, level, which is life-supporting, with catabolic, I believe, being life-destroying, which is below the level of 200 in Hawking's scale. I might be getting that mixed up, but essentially when you go higher, it's life-supporting, lower, it's life-destroying. As Tom Campbell would say, the higher you go, it's the lower entropy, The lower you go on the scale, the lower the consciousness is the higher entropy, which means more breakdown, more consciousness, and everything else. And being able to let go of judgments is so crucial. Now, there are ways to obviously do this on an obvious level, and then there's more subtle ways. For example, a more subtle way would be aiming to let go of labels, or at least emotionalizing labels at a high level. Now, again, this is not something you need to focus on, but let's say if you're judging others all the time, or you're judging yourself all the time, which is where a lot of people are at sometimes, that would be something to consistently work on letting go. But if you find that you actually are judging others less, or you catch yourself judging others and then you reframe it. For example, we're working with someone in our program where she's at this stage where she's starting to notice that, and then she consciously makes the choice to not follow through on the judgment or to take a step back when she's doing it, and now that pattern is starting to disappear and she finds herself naturally not judging as much. And that is such a powerful, powerful indicator of a raising in consciousness. And so that is the first clear sign, is you are letting go of judgment, especially towards others, especially towards the things in your life, and also towards yourself. And this is a lifelong journey, but if you find you are getting better and better at that, truly, like having that introspection, you can go maybe even a whole day without having, some judgments towards others, let's say, then you know you've been raising your consciousness, you know that you are effectively doing this, that you are more awake. Now, number two is another big one, because this is another part of the ego game, the mind, right, and not the heart. The heart is what really sings at higher levels of consciousness, where the mind is the one giving the commentary and really leading us more at the lower levels. And there's one thing that the mind, the ego, loves probably above all else, and that is being right. And you need to let go and unhook from the idea of always needing to be right. And why I put right in quotations is because so many times we're not even necessarily correct when it comes to whatever we think we are right about. But we will defend it to the death if we allow our ego in there to be the one leading the show, right? How many times has even humanity on a global scale believed in something that was later found out through further research or exploration to be wrong? We can look at many different things. We can look at Galileo's discoveries. We can look at other people who have come up and found, cutting edge things. We can look at quantum mechanics and the discovery of that, any of Tesla's stuff, like so many different things, right? Where even as a collective, in the collective consciousness and the collective thought, we were wrong. But how many people were willing to defend even to the death and start wars over things that in the end weren't even actually correct? And we may find that even what we discovered from there isn't the full truth, and usually it isn't either. But the ego doesn't care about that. It just wants to have the appearance of being right. And so another huge sign that you are raising your consciousness, you've gone beyond just those egoic forms of consciousness and awareness and awakening, is you are giving up the need to be right. Now, again, this may still, again, with all of these, it's not like perfect every single day. You never get caught in that. But it's you're noticing yourself when you're doing it, and you're changing your decision and your choices. Or maybe you find you don't get caught up in that as much. You don't care as much about being so-called right, and you kind of allow people to be themselves. You might invite them to see things from a higher level of awareness, but be detached from whether they believe you or want to come on board with that. Again, a fifth grader's learning certain things while first graders learning different things. What the first grader is going through isn't necessarily wrong. It's just what they need to go through, and the same goes for the fifth grader, right? It's just different levels of awarenesses. Something my mentor likes to say is, don't be surprised when someone in fear acts like someone who's in fear, or an alcoholic acts like an alcoholic. That's where they are at in the game, right? In the game of life, in their process of evolution, in their process of consciousness. And when they start making new choices, when they start growing, yeah, they'll be beyond that, but not before then. Right? And so to be able to not necessarily always need to be right, it's one of the biggest games of the ego, and it's one of the biggest things that will hold you back from raising your consciousness and being awakened. And you can see this happening in the spiritual space all of the time. It's called a spiritual ego, right? It's called spiritual bypassing, where we use spiritual terms and we have these spiritual arguments and go back and forth, and we have like these now more kind of nice and accepting kind of debates, instead of it being like more angry, even though underneath everything, it is coming from those same places. It's just now using more fluffy language in order to be like, actually, I'm right and you're wrong. And that's absolutely fine, but just understand what's happening there, right? And if you're not giving up that need to be right, it's going to really hold you back in raising your consciousness if that's something you want to do, or in just expanding your awareness. And again, when you don't give up the need to be right, you close yourself off from new information, new ideas, things that could help you expand, things the universe may be trying to show you. But if you're holding on to, no, this is what it is, this is what's right, screw this other person, that person, and what they think, instead of just being like, hey, maybe I don't agree with what they think, but they're allowed to believe what they believe, which is a much more calm, kind of peaceful, allow the person to go through their own unfolding instead of needing everyone to see it the way that you do. And number 3, the last one, another clear sign that you're more awakened and you are going, raising your consciousness, is practicing kindness and humility. And again, this is another staple, but can you practice kindness and humility as a place of beingness instead of a strategy? Instead of being like, you know what, I'll be kind because I heard in this whole law of attraction thing that if I'm kind, then I get kindness back. But if you're manufacturing kindness, then the energy behind it isn't really kindness. You know what I'm saying, right? But because you're being just someone who's at a higher level of vibration, because you're not being someone who's judging all the time or the need to be right all the time, you will start noticing that this one starts to take place more naturally. You may find that you're just more kind. You may find that more people gravitate towards you and are nicer to you in response, not because of things you are doing, but the way you are being. And the way you are being is going to influence the things that you are doing, but not in this tit-for-tat way, like someone saw you being nice randomly and went, you know what, I'm going to be nice to them too. And it's not like that can't happen, but it's just something to do with your beingness. And when you practice kindness and humility genuinely and authentically, again, not as a strategy, but because in your heart you want to be kind, because in your heart you want to be humble. And again, humble does not mean, because I think this word gets confused all the time, not shining your light or dimming yourself or not putting yourself out there. That's not what that means. Humility in the sense like I was talking about, maybe you're at a 6th grade level of awareness, but not needing to be right over the person who's in 1st grade or thinking you're better. Everyone's just on their journey. The acorn is no better or worse than the oak tree, but if we did it based on how fast something is happening or further along the so-called journey is better, then we would say, screw you, acorn. It's all about the oak tree. We need oak trees, but you can't get the oak tree without the acorn, right? You can't get to 6th grade without first going through 1st, right? And so neither is better or worse, and to have that humility of being the invitation and example, yes, but not needing to, again, be right, not needing to judge others because they're where they're at. You can always be the invitation to help others up if you're at a point where you're already shining your own light, you've filled your own cup, and you can give from your overflow. And some people will take it, and other people will shirk away, kind of like a vampire in the sun going like, I can't handle the light right now, I got other things to do, right? That's a silly example, but whatever, it's what came up. But anyway, when you have that true humility and that true kindness, that is a natural byproduct of raising your consciousness. When you are vibrating more at energy, if you know the Hawking scales, if you're more at willingness and acceptance and reason and love and joy and gratitude genuinely, and that's what you're vibrating at, that's what you're being from, kindness and humility come part and parcel with that. And that's why it's the final sign on here, because when you notice you are just naturally being more warm and kind, you are being, not as a strategy like in your thoughts, you're just kind of doing it, right? You're being more humble. You are more accepting of people where they're at, not putting yourself on this superior place because of where they're at. And it works the other way too, putting yourself in the inferior place and pedestalizing others is also kind of an ego game, right? And it may not sound, and that's how we sometimes kind of define humbleness. It's like, oh, I'm down here and they're here. It's not. It's actually the opposite. I know it may sound weird to say that, but degrading yourself, what you actually are, lowering yourself is not humble, right? That's not humility. But when you give the acceptance and allow people to unfold in their own ways, not putting yourself as better because you have maybe a certain level of awareness or whatever else it is, that's when you're starting to tap more into the humility, which will happen naturally as you raise your consciousness, and you may find kindness, genuine kindness, starts to come through as well. So these are 3 of the clearest signs I can give you that you're waking up. that you're moving up the consciousness scale. These are things that are going to naturally lead to different results. And again, with a lot of these, I would especially start with those first two. These are things you can start to practice. And that third one, the kindness and humility from an authentic place, will start to naturally become a byproduct of letting go of judgment and letting go more of judgment. Again, you may never be able to get to a point where you let go of all judgment, and that may not even be healthy while we're in human form, but to let go of it for the most part and catch yourself when you're doing it, and the need to be right. When you start letting go of those things more and more, the kindness and the humility, in my eyes, starts to really become more natural and more of just how you start to move as you raise these levels of consciousness. So anyway, I hope that has been valuable to you. Of course, there's many other things we could go over, but again, this is the 3 signs, very simple signs, and 3 kind of aids we give people in a really deep program we go into, and we teach them how to do this. This is actually like about, on module 12, we go over these little practices among some other things. And if you want to learn more about that, again, my Facebook group is down below. It's the Elite Transformation Experience. The group is free to join, but you can learn more about EMF and also get some additional resources as well. But again, you have to answer the questions to get in there. It takes 30 seconds, but we will not accept you into it unless you take the time and can commit to at least doing that. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, we live in a friendly universe, and I'll see you in the next one.